Welcome to all the media and all the fans for coming this afternoon. We've just come straight from mixing the album. The vibe has been great, and we are confident that this album will be up there as one of our best. It is therefore with great enthusiasm that we feel we are now in a position to proudly announce the next Depeche Mode World Tour. Thank you very much.
We just wanted to really be the Cure or something like that, you know, orchestral manoeuvres in the dark, or the Human League from Basildon.
When I'm with you, baby, I go out of my head, and I just can't get enough, and I just can't get enough. All the things you do to me and everything you said, I just can't get enough, I just can't get enough.
Vince was obviously the driving force behind the band. You know, it was him and Andy who first formed a composition of Sounders, we were called at the time. And, you know, I think they got me in because I was one of the only people that had a synthesizer in Basildon.
We kind of realised early on that we needed a front man, someone who could leap about to make us look interesting.
We walk together, we're walking down the streets, and I just can't get enough, and I just can't get enough. Every time I think of you, I know we have to meet, and I just can't get enough, and I just can't get enough. It's getting hotter, it's a burning love, and I just can't seem to get enough.
I think Dave was a friend of a friend, and we did an audition with him. We used to rehearse at one of the local schools, and he came up to one of the rehearsals.
Vince was sort of the lead singer before that, but you know, he wasn't really comfortable doing that. So we thought we'd grab him. Dave looks better than us and had about 1,000 more contacts. We had no contacts and he had loads of contacts, and he sang very well as well.
And we thought, yeah, you know, he'll do.
When we began, we had guitars, and it was a bass guitar and a general guitar and a drum machine, but then we gradually changed over to all synths.
Why did you quit the guitar and the bass?
It just seemed like a natural thing. Like Martin had a synthesizer, and Andy and Vince bought one. Following, it just seemed the right thing to do at that time.
Really, it was convenience. We just gradually changed over because it enabled us to be able to go anywhere with these keyboards, these small monophonic keyboards under our arm, and sort of plug into a PA system and play a gig. Not that we had any gigs really at the time, but they were quite cheap. You didn't have to have a good amp. We weren't any good at playing guitars anyway. We didn't sit down and say, let's go electronic. It was more convenience, and we actually played those instruments in a very sort of traditional format. You know, there was a bass line, there was a lead line, and there was a rhythm line.
The two places that I do recall are Crocs in Rayleigh, because that was the first residency, I suppose. They played a few Saturday nights when it opened, and they had all the local crowds, specifically Dave's fashion friends from college, so it quickly gave the band kudos in that area.
We became like the band of the scene down there, and in doing so had our own following of 50 people or something that would travel up to London. So we sort of created a little buzz without having to try too hard really, because it was just our mates. we actually went to Rough Trade, and Rough Trade was kind of like our last result. You know, it was like the last place we were going to go to if we were really that desperate. We were that arrogant or that naive, whatever you want to call it, that we thought that, you know, they had Cabaret Voltaire, and, you know, we were making this music that was like accessible, electronic accessible pop music.
Well, me and Dave went round to all the record companies because in them days you could actually go into the A&R departments and they'd play your tape there and then. It was amazing. I mean, you didn't have to make appointments or anything. You know, we went to Ireland, went to RCA, went to all the major record companies.
We had this quarter-inch tape that we insisted, you know, that the record label would play, and half the time they would just be like, have you got a cassette? Can you just... We'd be like, no, we're not going to leave unless you play our quarter-inch. And, you know, of course, most of the time the record companies would be like, yeah, right, okay, we'll see you later. But Scott actually played it. He's put it on a reel-to-reel. He was tapping his foot, and me and Vince sort of looking at each other thinking, that's it, we got it here, you know, we're signed. And he sort of coming to the end of it, and he was like, it's not really what we do, Rough Trade. And he said, but this guy that just came in, and Daniel had just sort of blown in the door and was ranting about something, about distribution or not being able to find Fad's records in some store. And shouting at people, and he said, Daniel, you know, what do you think of this?
And then he said, no, I'm not interested. And then he disappeared. And then we supported Fad Gadget at the Canning Town, and he came along because Fad Gadget was signed to Mute, and he came backstage.
We knew he was there because I think he was mixing Fad's sound. It was a big crowd, it was full up, and Daniel came back afterwards and came up to me, thinking I was the one at the time that was writing the songs or something, and I said, no, that's the guy over in the corner there. He sat down with Vince and was talking for a while, but I kind of gave him the cold shoulder. I think I told him to fuck off, actually, at the time. But he came back again and again.
I said, you know, do you want to do a single? Make a single with Mute Records.
We were big fans of Mute at the time, so yeah, that was a big night for us anyway. And then to get to meet Daniel and be offered a single deal, you know, on the spot was, you know, pretty amazing.
Behind me is a public house called the Bridge House. Well, it's been turned into a hotel now. I did a gig there once, supported by a band called Depeche Mode. The last I saw of them, they were heading out the door with Daniel Miller.
And there was him and another guy called Steve-O, who was making the Sun Bazaar record, and he was offering us a deal as well. And he said, well, you know, if you sign with me, then I can get you a support slot with Ultravox, and that sounded really like glamorous to us, so we were torn.
But they wanted us to sign some kind of like heinous 10-album deal, and we were not at all interested in that. We just wanted to make a single.
Was back in probably around about 1980, and I was working with Daniel. Daniel had just set up Mute Records. We'd put out the first record by a band called the Silicon Teens. We got to the point, it was really interesting because we got to the point where we were going to radio and nobody actually knew the Silicon Teens didn't exist. And we went to a radio interview at Capital Radio, and I remember Daniel Miller was going in pretending to be a friend of the band's or the band's tour manager or something like that. And we went in and he did the interview, and the girl who was interviewing him said, no, you're not whoever you say you are, you're Daniel Miller, I went to school with you. And as we left Capital, Dan said, you know, we ought to find a real band, we ought to find a proper band.
We knew Mute Records, we'd heard Fad Gadget, and he was like really cool. We'd heard like the normal single, and the Silicon Teens actually, so we just thought that it was a cooler label.
I do remember specifically Dave saying to me, we've decided to go with Daniel Miller, and I said, you know, asked him why, and he just said, well, because we just trust him.
For some bizarre reason, you know, we were working class kids in Basildon, we didn't have much money. and we went for the bloke that was offering us no money. Because we trusted him and because we liked the music on his label. So it turned out to be one of the best decisions we ever made.
Daniel gave them the perfect home, as he's done for all of his artists. I mean, Daniel, you know, it's the ideal. I think if they've been signed to a major, 2-3 albums, you just have to look back at the bands that were kind of their contemporaries, who are no longer with us.
It became a challenge because everybody had told them, "Oh, Mute's a nice little label, but you'll never have any success or international success with them." And so I just thought, fuck that. I wanna see if I can prove everybody wrong. Why shouldn't they be able to, you know? I mean, the old record companies are quite old-fashioned and very pop-orientated, and we were working in a completely different way.
When Daniel said, like, it's a 50-50 deal, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered, you know, whether we'd signed something or not, because it didn't really mean anything to us. The important thing was that we were going to make a single and go into a real recording studio and record a song, you know, that was... So if he'd said, like, you know, 99-1, give us a contract, we'd have signed it.
He said, I'll pay to make a single and do the best I can to... What do you want out of it? And we said, well, we want to be in the charts, you know, we want to be on the radio. And he said, well, I'll do my best. And so we went for it.
I was looking for a studio to finish off the Silicon Teens records, some of which I'd done at home in a very basic way. And I was really nervous about going into studio. I had no studio experience at all and felt that I was working kind of outside of the system and that people wouldn't really be sympathetic to what I was trying to do because they were just used to recording normal bands. But I phoned up Blackwing and it was Eric who answered. He just sounded very enthusiastic and very open to the way I wanted to work.
We put Dreaming of Me out, we struggled to get it on the radio, we struggled to get that first record away, and then Roger Ames, who was an A&R man at Phonogram in those days, approached the band and wanted to sign them. And I sat with the band, and I remember Dan sort of sitting quietly in the corner, and I was saying, guys, stay with Daniel. You know, Daniel's really going to look after you. And it was quite incredible, because they were... And I always remember Vince Clarke in those days, because Vince was still in Depeche at that point, and Vince said, yeah, it's all right, but if we get famous and we do Top of the Pops, do you think we can do that in the afternoon so that I can get back on a cheap day return to Basildon?
Dreaming of me.
When the single got in the chart top hundreds, we were amazed. I mean, it's like when we first heard it on the radio, we just couldn't believe it. You know, it was just incredible.
And of course the record didn't fly in the chart, it wasn't a huge success, but I think if you look back in retrospect, as a first record, it was kind of setting the ground, it was building the right foundations for the future, and you know, the truth is that if you have a record that flies in on your first record and is a very big hit, the chances are you don't have a long career.
Everybody felt that was a good start, because I never got anywhere near the charts with any of my singles before, you know.
To actually reach 57 was a real achievement, and that's when we felt that, you know, if we actually did concentrate a little bit more on the band, you know, maybe give up our day jobs, that we could possibly actually make it.
Filming and dreaming of me.
They were very young, very naive and very shy. I mean, Dave used to, you know, hide behind the microphone stand back in those days.
We would record like a traditional band. We'd set up the Moog Prodigy or Mark's Yamaha in the other room, you know, in the sort of live room, and plug it in and sort of play the part. So it was pretty much, we just laid down each part like we would live.
I wanted to capture as best I could the atmosphere and the vibe I got from the songs from when I saw them live, really. Used some little experimental things. I was quite keen to do that, as we did on some of the tracks more than others. Just to have a really good electronic pop sound that was theirs, really, and wasn't a copy of something else. I'd made my own records in my bedroom and worked in a studio
finishing off the Silicon Teens album, and I'd worked with Fad Gadget and a couple of other people. But the only reason I was a producer for them was that I knew a bit more. I just knew a bit more about the studio than they did, I think, and also a little bit more about programming synthesizers and stuff like that.
Well, he was a lot more savvy with synthesizers, and especially old analog stuff. So he brought in his ARP 2600 and ARP sequencer.
That was the really all-important piece of equipment that he brought along, because it meant that you could actually program something and it would be in time. So that was really revolutionary for us.
Half of the mixing you do as you go along, because you've got to bounce so many tracks together. Because there's only 8 tracks, you're very limited. So you could have had the drums all on one track, and then bass and pad synth on another, all backing vocals and another synth on another track.
When there were limitations on what you could do in the studio, I think it was quite good actually. There were no automated mixes or anything like that, so all of us, the band, Daniel and Eric, would all be at the control at the desk, turning things off and on. We would all have cues to get the final mixes down, and it was really exciting. And then we'd all pile into Eric's car to listen to the mix on his car stereo, because we felt that was like a good test.
They were raining from the sky, exploding in my heart. Is this a love in the sky, or just a form of modern art? From the skies you could almost see that cry. Dora, Dora, Dora. In the town they were.
Speaking Spell came from Daniel, the title, and it's just from that little toy in the speaking machine. I think that there was discussions about whether we get in trouble for using it, but it was fine in the end.
It was still at the time then where album covers, they just sort of happened. They weren't marketing exercises. I did album covers in my own home above the radiators, or in my bedroom and things.
I don't know what it's about. I remember when we first saw it, I think we asked him, and he probably gave some metaphoric answer, best you can get out of Brian. It was a pretty stunning cover, and it certainly became a talking point. What was this bird in the plastic case?
And I remember setting it up on my own, actually. I didn't have any help. And I don't know why I got a stuffed swan and covered it in plastic. I have no idea. Do you have any idea?
I remember seeing it and just being amazed at how much someone could charge for doing an album cover. It was like £1,000 or something. Or, it was outrageous.
Everybody was up in arms about it, really. I think they still are. I think they still hate the sight of it. I think it's grown quite famously big for being an awful cover, I think. Goodness knows what was going on at the time.
I played an American. I played an American.
Thank you. The general music industry was surprised because of the success of the band and being totally electronic.
People were about to enter the guitar wars, where it was the death of the guitar, and Depeche were one of the bands that were, supposedly heralding the death of the guitar.
And it was just for some reason we seemed to be perceived in the wrong way, and people didn't take us as seriously as maybe Heaven 17 or maybe the Human League or some of those bands, which was very depressing because the band I cared the most about was Depeche.
There was so much pressure to be credible in one respect, and also be a chart act. And initially they were very nervous of, and continue to be for quite a while, nervous of the press and what press would do to them.
I stand still stepping on a shady street, and I watch that man to a stranger. Think you only know me when you turn on the light. Now the room is lit with danger. Complicating, circulating, new life, new
Life kind of did change everything. It was a huge record. It went on the radio after a struggle, but it went on the radio. And the boys then broke the mould. We got Top of the Pops. It all started to happen. And I think, you know, for the process of New Life, I think the band were loving every second of it. You know, it was exciting. They were having a hit record, and we had an album to come shortly on the back of that. And it was kind of getting to the point where, yeah, we're happening. This is all developing in the right direction.
New life, operating, generating, new life, new life.
I was actually on Top of the Pops when I was still at work. I was treated as a hero when I walked in the next day, because that's in the days when Top of the Pops was really, really popular. And so I think I was doing my month's notice.
I remember not sleeping the night before, you know, which seems ridiculous now, you know, but, you know, again, we were really young, and it's you know, it was a programme that you grew up with.
There was a bit of fear, because I think that New Life was like at number 11, and Martin said to Daniel Miller, you know, do you really think we've got to give up our day jobs? And Daniel had to say, yeah, I think you're safe now.
I called my office. I said, look, if I get on the Concorde, I just have a hunch about this. If I get on the Concorde and come over, can you guys pick me up and take me to Basildon? And I said, you know where it is. It's right off the 81, you know, which of course it wasn't. But they knew where it was, fortunately. And at least I had the town right. And I saw them.
We were really shocked that someone from New York would bother coming all the way to Basildon to see us.
At that point, there were similar bands around, but I don't know how you could watch them for an hour without falling asleep. Depeche Mode were the first of those bands that was so fucking great live that it was just amazing.
They were a band who were prepared to work hard, and I didn't want to waste their time with useless shows, but at the same time I felt that to have a lot of shows in the calendar was always good.
People were coming with a sort of strange expectation because they were going to see probably one of their first shows where there hadn't been a band actually playing, you know, conventional instruments on stage. So I think people had a sort of strange expectation about what they were going to see. We were certainly a bit surprised about it because we hadn't done a show with a band that didn't have a drummer, and, you know, in some ways it was quite a simplistic sort of setup, wasn't it?
Yeah, but also it was harder in a way because you haven't got the visuals of a drummer and people behind keyboards are restricted. It was so much was on Dave's shoulders that he used to have to really work the crowd, and it was obviously the music but also the live side, the way it picked up the reputation of being such a good night, because he had the famous saying, "And you up there," didn't he? Because when he used to play Hammersmith Odeon, he used to include the balcony and just about everyone in there, and it was amazing.
But it was also from those days, I don't know if it was a fact that they were sort of, you know, a band together in uniformity, but I mean, he was never one of those guys who would talk to the audience, you know. It would be like, you know, come on, get going, or you're up there, or whatever, but it's never the long chats in between the shows, which has carried on all the way through, really. He's never been a vocal person on stage, apart from
he doesn't crack one-liners, does he?
No, not like us. He never listened to us, did he?
By October, they're doing a very serious national tour. They play Newcastle, Edinburgh, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham, Liverpool, Sheffield, Bristol, Basildon, dear Basildon, Wreckhouse, Brighton, Poole, Leicester, and 2 nights at the Lyceum. And actually, talking of memories, those 2 nights at the Lyceum were awesome. And I remember pulling the promoter and the hall manager into the venue
and pointing at the rear balcony and saying, "Can you see how much that balcony is moving?" Because it was bouncing up and down, because the kids were bouncing up and down. That was 2 rammed shows. Huge success.
I don't think we were really thinking in past the next gig, actually. The only time it started wearing on me was when we did the last tour, when I did the last tour with them.
Bright light, the dark room. Bright light, the dark room. Bright light, dark room. Bright light, the dark room. Bright light. Thank you.
Do you think that the band will look the same in another 2 years with only synths?
If you come back in 2 years' time, then you can say, I don't think we're going to change. You never know, though. You know, we might change in a week's time, but who knows?
News.